When I first met Erin, she was a single mom who had lost her husband and was raising two young kids on her own. One of them, Ethan, was 4 years old, full of energy, always zooming around with his little toy cars and firing off endless questions. The other, baby Ella, was barely taking her first steps, clinging to her mom wherever she went. Their father, a military man, had died in action. He was hailed as a hero, but heroes never come home. That loss left Erin struggling to hold everything together on her own, and you could see how worn out she was. I saw a woman who had been through the ringer doing it all by herself, so I stepped in, not because I had to or because someone told me to, but because I genuinely wanted to help. I wanted to give these kids a steady home, to be the father figure they'd lost, and to make sure they never felt like something was missing. And for years, that's exactly what I did. I worked long hours, but I always made sure that nothing came between my job and my family. I ensured Ethan and Ella had everything they needed: a good education, new clothes, a safe roof over their heads, and a warm meal every night. I wasn't just there for the money, though. I showed up at every school event, sitting in the front row and clapping louder than anyone else. Every birthday was a celebration filled with cake, gifts, and plenty of laughter. Every vacation was planned to create memories that would last a lifetime. They didn't just call me by my first name, they called me Dad, and it felt real. They loved me like a true father, and I loved them as if they were my own kids. I truly felt like the luckiest guy in the world. But life has a way of changing, and just when I thought everything was perfect, things started to shift. There were a few offhand, disrespectful remarks here and there. Nothing huge at first, and I brushed them off, telling myself it was just a phase as they grew up. I never expected how quickly everything I built would unravel. When Ethan turned 17, he suddenly believed he was too old for any rules. He started coming home late, ignoring curfews, and dismissing my advice like it meant nothing. Baby Ella wasn't far behind. She mimicked her brother, rolling her eyes and acting as if nothing I said mattered. When I asked them to clean up after themselves or reminded them to focus on their schoolwork, they would just shrug me off and walk away. Whenever I tried to set even basic boundaries, they pushed back hard. All I wanted was a little respect, but to them, my rules felt like oppression, like someone was trying to control them. And every time they talked back, I would look to Erin, hoping she'd step in. Instead, she would just sit there quietly, sometimes pretending to be busy on her phone, other times sighing as if I was the unreasonable one. At first, I made excuses for her. Maybe she was simply too tired or didn't want to start another fight. Or maybe she was trying to keep the peace. But over time, it became painfully clear that she wasn't just being passive. She was allowing them to treat me that way. That should have been my first wake-up call. I'll never forget the night everything shifted. Ethan had been out later and later each night. And that night, he finally came home after midnight. No call, no text, just walking in as if he owned the place. I wasn't yelling or losing my cool. I just calmly asked, "Where have you been?" I expected him to show some guilt or offer an apology, but instead he rolled his eyes and muttered, "Relax, I'm not a kid." That's when I told him, "You live under my roof, and you follow my rules. If you can't respect that, we've got a problem." He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." For a moment, a chill ran through me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, little Ella chimed in with a quiet nod and said, "Yeah, you're just some guy, not our real dad." I turned to Erin, expecting her to correct them, to tell them they were out of line, but she just stood there, no anger, no disappointment, nothing. In that moment, something inside me broke. You'd think that after everything I'd done for them, after all the years I spent raising them, there would be a limit to the disrespect I'd endure. But there wasn't. A few days later, the same thing happened all over again. This time, it wasn't just Ethan talking back or Ella echoing him. Erin joined in. It all started over something trivial. Ella had left a mess in the kitchen with plates piled up in the sink, crumbs scattered everywhere, and spilled juice on the floor. I calmly asked her to clean up after herself, expecting some sense of responsibility. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That stung, but before I could even respond, Ethan jumped in with, "Why are you always trying to boss us around? You're not even our real dad." Then came Erin's soft, casual voice, as if her next words wouldn't haunt me forever. She barely looked up from her phone, didn't have the decency to meet my eyes, and simply said what needed to be said. In that instant, it wasn't just anger or hurt I felt. It was clarity. I knew I was done. That night, I sat alone in the dark, thinking over all the years I'd spent taking care of those kids, all the sacrifices I'd made, and how despite everything, I meant nothing to them. And if I meant nothing, maybe it was time to start acting like it. So I did something I should have done a long time ago. I stopped giving, stopped caring, and stopped trying. I stopped driving them to school. If they wanted to get there, they'd have to figure it out themselves. I stopped the allowances because I wasn't their bank. I stopped protecting them. If they got into trouble, they'd have to deal with it on their own. I stopped stepping in, stopped offering advice, stopped being the caring father figure. They clearly didn't want me around as a dad, and that was fine. They could see what life was like without one. I won't lie, it hurt more than I can even describe. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. You eventually learn that some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone, that they think they can treat you like trash, and you'll just keep swallowing it. That was Ethan, Ella, and Erin all rolled into one. When I stopped acting like their dad, they initially thought I was joking. They laughed. Ethan and Ella pretended my decision didn't matter. Good. Now we don't have to deal with him bossing us around. Mom's got us. We don't need him. I overheard one day. For a while, the change didn't seem to hit them hard because Erin made sure to cover for me. She organized their little shopping trips, kept their weekends filled with fast food outings, and made sure they were still comfortable, confident, and convinced they didn't need me. They even snickered behind my back, making sarcastic remarks as I walked by, as if I wasn't even there. I stayed silent, though, because I knew something they didn't. Erin wasn't flush with cash, and I was the one who had been holding our makeshift family together. I waited, and eventually, things took a turn. At first, it was just minor things. The weekend shopping sprees slowed down, fewer bags were brought home, the fast food runs became less frequent, and suddenly the new clothes stopped piling up in their closets. Then it got worse. School fees came due, and Erin started to get anxious. Ethan got into trouble at school, and normally I would step in and talk to the principal, but not this time. When Ella's phone broke, I would have replaced it in a heartbeat, but again, not this time. And the worst part, no more rides from Uber. They actually had to do something they'd never done before. They had to take the bus. I still remember the morning Ethan missed his bus because he assumed someone would pick him up. When he realized no one was coming, he had to sprint 3 blocks just to catch the city bus. Ella complained to Erin, asking why she couldn't just arrange another ride, and Erin's answer was blunt, "Because I don't have the money right now." Hearing that, I couldn't help but smile because I knew the reality check had finally hit them. About a month later, Erin finally lost it. One evening after work, I came home to find her waiting in the kitchen with her arms crossed, face flushed, clearly ready to fight. "You're being a damn child, Michael. What kind of man punishes his own family just because he's hurt?" she snapped. I just stood there, staring at her because she had used that word, responsibilities. Not love, not family, not respect. It was just about being a provider. So, I asked her plainly, "Why do you never stand up for me? Why do you always let them talk to me like that?" That's when she slipped up. With a sneer, she said, "Because I agree with them. Michael, you were never really their dad." In that moment, something inside me froze. She continued, "I told them not to let you control them. I raised them alone before you came along, and I can do it all over again." I should have been angry or heartbroken, but instead I felt a deep sense of relief. Finally, she had said it out loud. I wasn't their real father, not really her partner, just a walking paycheck at convenience. Ethan and Ella stood in the hallway, arms folded, with smug little grins on their faces. This was it. This was who they truly were. I nodded, turned around, and walked away, not out of weakness, but because I was done. I always believe that when people show you who they are, you should believe them. And now, I had no choice but to accept the truth. After I stopped supporting their lifestyle, the kids started acting out even more. Soon, my personal belongings began disappearing. Files I had carefully organized on my desk vanished when I needed them most. And one day I found my car parked safely in the driveway, keyed with deep scratches along the driver's side. At first, I couldn't believe they were capable of such vandalism. But then, one night, I came home to discover my closet had been ransacked. My clothes were shredded and strewn all over the floor. When I checked the security cameras, there they were, Ethan and Ella laughing as they tore through my stuff. For weeks, I pretended everything was fine. I let them think they'd won, remaining quiet and detached, even as they tried harder to push my buttons. Behind the scenes, though, I was collecting evidence. I recorded their threats, saved every hostile text, took photos of my ruined belongings, anything that would prove the toxic environment I was living in. Quietly, I began putting my exit plan into action. I met with a lawyer, explained everything, and showed all the evidence: the threats, the property damage, and the overall hostile atmosphere. The lawyer assured me I had a solid case for divorce, and, given the circumstances, I could even ask for a restraining order if needed. The process wasn't immediate. It took weeks of legal meetings, paperwork, and formal reports. I filed an official police report about the damage to my property. While the authorities weren't going to raid our home over a few broken items, the documented history of threats helped strengthen my case. Then, one morning, after everything had been processed, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter before heading to work. Inside, Erin found the divorce papers. At first, I imagined she thought I was bluffing, but soon she was calling me, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. I'm sure she must have rushed to gather more documents, because her next call was even more frantic. Along with the divorce papers were copies of my police reports, documentation of threats, and evidence of the property damage. My lawyer had advised me to include everything as a preemptive measure against any false accusation she might try to make. I didn't answer her calls. I'd already moved out, taking only the things that truly mattered to me. All the joint bank accounts were closed. Any money she thought she could access was gone. Everything was now in my name, and I made sure she had no legal claim over anything. Now, she was completely on her own. When Erin's calls went unanswered, her messages started flooding in. At first, they were full of anger and blame. "You're such a coward, Michael. You ran away as soon as things got tough. A real man, a real dad, would never abandon his family. I don't need you. I can take care of my kids just fine without you." It was almost laughable. This was the same woman who had encouraged those kids to turn against me, to treat me like an outsider in my own home. And now she was acting as if I had abandoned them when, in truth, they'd already pushed me away. I didn't bother replying. There was nothing left to say. Weeks turned into months, and the messages from Erin began to slow, probably because reality had finally set in. She was truly on her own now, without that financial safety net, without the easy money. She had always boasted about being able to manage by herself, but I knew the truth. She'd grown too used to the lifestyle I provided, and without it, things weren't so simple. Then, out of nowhere, I received a new batch of messages, this time from the kids. The first message was a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't reply. A few days later, another message came through. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but things aren't great right now." Still, I stayed silent. A few days after that, Ella reached out. "Hey, Michael, I just wanted to say that I hope you're doing okay." I stared at my screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, but no words came out. Over the next few weeks, more messages kept coming, and their tone slowly shifted. Initially, they were casual, a half-hearted attempt to break the ice, but soon regret began to seep in. One message read, "I'm sorry for everything. We should have treated you better. Things have been really hard since you left, and Mom isn't handling it well." And then there was one that almost made me laugh. "I miss you." I let those messages sit unread. I didn't respond or acknowledge them because I was finally free. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's never to let anyone take you for granted, never to beg for respect, and never to waste your energy proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. Most importantly, when you realize you're being used, walk away. Some people only understand your value once you're gone, and by then it's too late. Leaving Erin and the kids was the hardest decision I've ever made. Not because I didn't still care about them, but because for so long I convinced myself that I needed them, that being a good man meant enduring constant disrespect, and sacrificing your own dignity. I was wrong. A man who values himself doesn't stick around where he isn't appreciated. Now, I live for myself. I focus on my career, my personal goals, and my own happiness. I spend time with people who genuinely care about me. I've reconnected with old friends, traveled, and started new hobbies that I never had time for before. I no longer wake up every day wondering what drama awaits me. I wake up free. And that, my friends, is how I reclaim my life. The lesson here is simple. Never let anyone treat you like an ATM. Never beg for respect. And remember that some people only realize your worth once you're gone. By then, it's far too late. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, share it with them.